Welcome to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. We had a great weekend of games. Unfortunately, some of the big games that we thought were going to be much better ended up being kind of blowouts. We had an interesting one in the Kentucky-Arkansas game, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But, overall, pretty good weekend of games.
Yeah, probably the best slate on paper. I think it lived up to the hype for the most part, especially with like the later games. But yeah, a few blowouts in there. But a couple of them were expected. So like Duke UNC, I think was pretty expected, and they jumped all over them at the beginning of that game. So
yeah, and speaking of Duke UNC, we'll start there. Just quickly recap that game. That game really was over from the jump. Like first possession, I remember Cooper Flag got it. James slipped a screen, Flag hit him for a dunk, and I was basically like, this game's over. Like there just was no resistance out of the UNC defense, and Duke was really able to get whatever they wanted. And got up by as many, I believe, as 31 in this game before ultimately winning by, 17, 87-70. So, Cooper Flag was great again. UNC made it look a little bit more respectable late. Drake Powell had a nice, last 10 minutes of the game, making some shots. But overall, this game kind of went how I expected. Duke just jumped him from the start, got up 25-6, and never looked back.
Yeah, and then I was a little bit surprised that UNC started the game by playing small ball with Ben Allen Lubin at the 5 and then playing the 4 guards around him. It just doesn't make sense against a team that's hyper athletic and can keep up with you quickness wise with 6'9", 6'8" across the board. It was men against boys basically in that game. And when they play each other then the season, I know it's going to be in the Dean Dome. I really don't expect it to go much differently. I don't think UNC's deficiencies can really be solved in the second game around. So yeah, Duke just dominated from the jump, and they just continue to show that they're the class of this conference, and there's really nobody to compete with them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. This just really shows the gap, unfortunately, this year between these two teams. And for the UNC listeners out there, I know they wish they'd had a little bit better of a portal season so that they could be in a bit better of a spot. But now they're sitting at 13-10, on the outside looking in of most bracket projections, as we're now into February, right? So about 6 weeks away. I think 6 weeks from today is Selection Sunday, if I remember correctly. So, it's coming fast, and UNC is running out of time and also running out of real quality wins to pick up on their schedule. So it seems to be looking bleak, unfortunately, for the Tar Heel faithful out there.
Yeah, I would agree. And they're, what are they? The 5th best team in this league right now? I would probably put Louisville, Clemson, and Pittsburgh probably ahead of them right now.
Wake,
you're the 5th best team, and Wake is in contention to be there. They're sitting around the bubble right now, bracket projections. So it's pretty ugly, and I don't think you'll get any more than 4. You might get 5 teams out of this league, and so UNC is going to be sitting right around the bubble, regardless of how they perform really down the stretch.
Yeah, I agree. Next game took place in Knoxville, Florida, who handled Tennessee by 30 at the beginning of conference play, then turned around and laid an absolute egg, 64-44. They shot 24% from the field, 14% from 3, turned it over 13 times. Really an ugly game. Walter Clayton was the only one in double figures, but he actually attempted more shots than he had points. So this was really quite ugly for Florida, despite Milicic and Zakai Ziegler being out for Tennessee. They just turned this game into a defensive battle, and eventually just pulled away because Florida wasn't making shots at all yesterday.
Yeah, and that's how Tennessee's going to win games, especially with those two guys out. I don't really ever see them putting up 80 without Ziegler and Milicic in the lineup. But Tennessee, they gave Florida a taste of their own medicine on their home floor when they went went to Gainesville and shot 1 for 24 from three. It was pretty ugly. It looked like an exact replica of it. So, but Walter Clayton, he got hurt in this game. He hurt his ankle at the end of the first half and tried to give it a go in the second half and was kind of just limping around all over the floor. And they didn't really have a chance without him in this game. And this was just the all-time revenge game that everyone had circled, and it was kind of expected. I thought the matchup was kind of favorable for Florida in this game, but they didn't make any shots. So it was pretty ugly. I didn't put any stock into this game for what it's worth. It's hard to evaluate Tennessee without Ziegler and Milicic, because when they come back, they're going to be right in the mix. They're going to be playing 30 minutes a game at least. And for Florida, just more of a one-off game, and Tennessee was just playing with more intensity throughout.
Yeah. This was definitely like, on the surface, if you're looking at this game and you're like, wow, Ziegler and Milicic are out and Tennessee already lost these guys by 30. If you would have told me at the end of the game it would be a 50-point swing from their last matchup, I would have been pretty surprised. I think it just goes to show what the SEC really is, right? I mean, it's just a very loaded league. Despite what you may think of like Tennessee being overrated, or some of the other teams in the league being overrated, like all these teams are capable of beating anyone, but also capable of losing to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, especially on their home floor. Like, I could easily see Auburn going on the road and like they almost lost to South Carolina. I know Broome got hurt in that game, but like we consider South Carolina probably the bottom of the league, them and LSU, and we've seen teams struggle with them. Like LSU almost went to Alabama and beat them. So anybody can beat anybody in this league, and once it gets to NCAA tournament time, like they're going to be so dangerous. They beat the crap out of teams in non-conference. Like their record was, I don't even know exactly what the record was against other Power 5 leagues, but it was utterly ridiculous. And I kind of expect the same thing come March Madness.
Yeah. Coach Cal went back to Rupp Arena last night. I know you sent me a text last night that said we both called this game in terms of who we expected Arkansas to keep it close, didn't expect it to go like this, and we had 0 U.S. currency on this game. Brutal. Arkansas just really handled it. Like first half was a track meet, 46-45 at the half. But ultimately, like Arkansas had their most efficient shooting night of the year in Coach Cal's return to Rupp Arena. Shot 55% from the field, 52% from three, put up 89 points. And really, like Kentucky didn't even shoot the ball bad, right? They shot the ball almost 50%, right? Made 10 threes themselves. So, this was really impressive, I think. It just felt like Arkansas was going to play up in this game for Coach Cal, regardless of the season that they're having. This was going to be a game that they were going to be ready for, and likely Coach Cal has had this one circled on his calendar ever since he took this job, right? A little bit disappointing that they booed him. It had become time, as we talked about at the beginning of these episodes, right? Coach Cal, it was just time for them to move on, both sides to go a different direction. But he brought a lot of winning and a lot of success to that program, and a national championship at that. I know the last few years have been rocky for them, but at the end of the day, like as a Kentucky fan, you should be pretty grateful for what he did for the program. I get that it's all just kind of part of the charade of like, he's the enemy now and coming into our territory, so we're going to boo him. But they really should be grateful for the time that he gave them.
For sure. I think it was just kind of how it ended with the lack of tournament success. And it's really hard to, give a guy a round of applause when he comes in as the enemy in that game. But when he retires, obviously they're gonna have a whole ceremony for him, and they'll give him his flowers then at that point. I mean, he won a national championship with Kentucky, obviously, but as for the actual game, like Arkansas was always going to come into this game extremely motivated. Like they had 3 or 4 players on the roster that were on the team last year, and we're going to be super motivated for this revenge game, if you want to call it that. And the problem with Kentucky is that make teams feel a little bit too comfortable on the offensive end because they really don't try to turn you over. They're super conservative defense, and we've seen it happen time and time again. They get into shot making battles, and that makes them really vulnerable when they don't shoot it well. And even with Kentucky being the greatest of shooting teams, they're not going to light it up every single night. And this super motivated Arkansas team that still has a lot of talent was able to show out and ultimately win this game by 10.
Yeah. Obviously, Arkansas still very, very, very much on the outside looking in, but maybe if they can continue to replicate this over the next 5-6 weeks and can get hot, maybe we can start talking about them a little bit more as a potential threat. But to me, I think this is just kind of a flash in the pan of like they were going to be motivated for this game. So I don't really put a ton of stock in it until they show me something maybe for an extended stretch of a couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, they didn't solve any problems, I don't think. I just think they played with the most effort they've played all year, and they were the most locked in that they've been all year. So, and they made 52% of their shots from three. So that always helps because they hadn't made a shot from three in all of SEC play. I think they were shooting like under 25% from three in conference play before this game. So I think it's a little bit more of a one-off with how well they shot the ball. I mean, John L. Davis looked much more comfortable than he has throughout SEC play.
I was going to say
because of Kentucky.
I was going to say he had probably his best game of his career there at Arkansas.
Yeah, they just kept running him off screens, just the Calipari patented floppy action that he runs every single possession in the half court. And, again, Kentucky's not going to bother you. And Davis wasn't going to be overwhelmed by any sort of SEC athleticism in this game, which I think has been a lot of his issues is playing against true power conference athleticism. But he felt comfortable in this game and he made a bunch of shots. And, DJ Wagner made a bunch of shots in the second half. I think he had 15 or 16 in the second half. So credit to them. But yeah, I don't really think they fixed their problems, especially on the offensive side.
Yeah, no. We had another game, Texas Tech at Houston. This was one of the picks you gave out, Cody. Texas Tech plus 11, right? They won outright at Houston. Houston very banged up right now. They were able to send this game to overtime, and then ultimately lost by 82-81. But their front court's banged up. Emmanuel Sharp, who really should have sat out all week this week, as we were talking about yesterday. After their big come-from-behind win at Kansas, this felt like a week where they could have maybe afforded to rest him and get his ankle right. But now here they are a week later with a loss on their record now, and even more banged up than they were coming into the week.
Yeah, it just sucks that they continue to get hurt every single year because, like last year, you lost Jamal Shed in the NCAA tournament. Juwan Roberts was playing banged up for the last month and a half of the season, and it looks like he might be playing banged up once again. And, Francis came out of that game, limped off the floor, actually needed help getting off the floor because of a leg injury. So who knows how long he's going to be out. And I just think, this Houston team just has a little bit too much pride that they take in every single game that they play. They never want to throw a game away or even have the chance to throw a game away, but it's at the expense of not being healthy in March, where they're the far more banged up team. People say it's partly because of their style of play and how they play. They play so hard and so physical, and it leads to more injuries. I don't know if I really buy into that all that much. It's just he runs his guys out there every single night, however they feel, and it might be for the worse come March. But yeah, I mean, credit Texas Tech. I mean, they made a ton of shots in this game. They kind of exposed the Houston defense that will give up a ton of threes, and Tech has a million shooters at their disposal, and McMillan and Darian Williams had some big shots in this game. Hawkins was great, but I mean, the storyline at the beginning of this game was JT Toppin getting ejected for accidentally kicking someone in the midsection. He went and threw a jump pass, and I think it was Francis or it was Tugler that he accidentally kicked in the nuts and on a jump pass. And it was you're naturally just going to use your legs to throw when you jump to make a pass, and they ended up giving him a flagrant 2 and he got ejected. And then Grant McCaslin saw the replay, freaked out, got got a tee, then like threw his marker into the stands, and then he got a second tee and got tossed. I just thought it was the most criminal ejection that I've really ever seen. It's probably the worst call I've seen all season. And yeah, I mean, credit them for winning that game after losing arguably your best player and your brilliant head coach 4 minutes into the game. So yeah, just an all around like pretty crazy game. A lot of stuff happened, and long term for Houston, it might have been even worse than just the win, just the loss.
Yeah, and that'll be something to monitor here this week, especially who's in, who's out for them. But great win for that for Texas Tech, right? The next game, last game, that was really the nightcap. I got a little bit ruined at halftime or around halftime, just out of halftime, with the Luka Doncic Shams bomb that dropped. But nonetheless, this was an awesome basketball game for those of you that stayed up and stuck around for it, despite Stephen A. Smith being on ESPN2, just blabbering about the trade and what it means for the NBA. But this game was really exactly what St. Mary's wanted, right? A low-scoring game between these two teams where they limit Gonzaga's ability to get out in transition. And St. Mary's really, I think, overperformed shooting the ball, especially in the first half. They were very fortunate, banked in a couple shots, right? I mean, they caught lightning in a bottle for a bit, I thought, and Gonzaga just never really got it going, right? They made a run to start the second half, got up by 2, then it was really back and forth, but Gonzaga's end of game execution again wasn't very good, and ultimately St. Mary's got the job done with a big block on Graham Ike late, and then couple free throws to ice it.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably my favorite regular season game every single year. The game when Gonzaga has to go to St. Mary's. It's a really cool environment overall, and St. Mary's always is able to muck up the game and slow the pace down. They always play this game under 65 possessions and keep Gonzaga under 65 to 70, and they kept them under 60 in this game, the 62-58 win. And yeah, I would say they were a bit fortunate just with they started 6 for 8 from 3, and like you said, they banked in a couple, and their offense really sputtered, like especially to begin the second half, and then for a couple spurts in the first half after they stopped making every shot that they took. But I think the St. Mary's team is all the way legit. I think they have way more upside than they've had in the past. Like we saw last night with Mikey Lewis hitting, I think he hit 5 or 6 threes in this game, and Paulos Morauskas didn't have the best game, but I think he gives this team a lot more upside scoring the ball in the front court. He's super versatile, he can hit jumpers at times as well. And obviously Marshallonis is the head of the snake on the offensive end. I think this team has legit like Final Four upside. Like we've talked about it a little bit, but we've seen it before. Like last year, like Grand Canyon kind of overwhelmed them with athleticism in the first round of the tournament. Like they always had a high floor, low ceiling. I think they have more of a floor ceiling combo at this point, and they showed it last night with their ability to actually get hot from 3. Like they didn't have that at all last year. Like they always had Alex Dukas, and he was really the only shooter on the entire roster that could do anything. But now they actually have legit weapons all over the floor, and it actually gives them a real chance. And like I said, they showed it against Gonzaga, who I still think is a really good team.
Yeah, but Gonzaga very rarely has 7 losses by this point in the season, right?
I think they were around this last year.
Yeah, but still in the Mark Few era, right? Especially over the last 10 years, it's not very common. So, especially now finding themselves 3 games back in the West Coast Conference. So, definitely a difficult spot for them to be in now. Probably not looking at winning the regular season title, regardless of what happens. St. Mary's probably is not going to drop 3 games at this point.
Yeah, they're three games up now, I think.
Yeah.
Gonzaga's 7-3. St. Mary's still hasn't lost. They're not done with their gauntlet of a schedule yet right now on their run right now. I think they go to San Francisco, and then they have to play Santa Clara again, Oregon State twice. Like they still have a tough schedule coming up, but I think they've shown that they're maybe the best team in the league. I don't know. I don't really want to concede with Gonzaga yet, but Yeah, St. Mary's might be the best team in the league.
Yeah. Going to quickly mention a couple of other games from yesterday. UConn took down Marquette by 8. And anyone that watched this game, UConn turned it over like 24 times. It was a very uneven game. Rarely do you see 24 turnovers and a win. But they shot it super efficiently early and got up enough, got up 22. And Marquette ultimately wasn't able to come back in this one. But it felt like they were going to for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I had money on UConn to at least cover this game, and the better team did not win this game. I think it was all UConn shot making. Like after they stopped making every single shot that they took, Marquette turned them over basically whenever they wanted to. It was kind of a crazy game to watch.
Solo ball was huge, right?
He's unbelievable.
7 for 9 from 3.
Marquette's offense is just not in a good spot right now. Cam Jones is really regressing right now, and Chase Ross and Stevie Mitchell stopped making all the shots that they made in non-con. So I'm not going to call them fraudulent by any means, but their offense is really regressing right now. Like David Joplin hasn't picked up the slack as the number 2 guy, and just Jones isn't making the same shots that he made last year. Partly because he's on ball way more. He's only shooting like 32% from 3, and he's actually really struggled from the free throw line, which I'd never realized like how much of a problem that's been throughout his career. He's only like a 70% shooter from the line in his career, and I think he's below 70 right now. So yeah, maybe I got a little bit carried away by Cam Jones, and it's definitely showing that he's regressing in conference play.
Yeah, he is. Another game, Baylor over Kansas, 81-70. Baylor was down by as many as like 22 in this game. They were down big, and they actually were down. I remember I got a phone call, and they were down by 8. And then by the time I hung up the phone, like 5 minutes later, they were up 7. And I was like, what in the world happened? So quality win there for them. Kansas, searching for some quality wins. And they're going to have a chance tomorrow to take down Iowa State in another big one in a revenge spot. But, quite a meltdown by Kansas here on the road.
Yeah, I actually turned the game off when Kansas got up 20. So, and then I saw it was a 5-point game again, and I eventually tuned back in. I didn't know what the hell was going on either side. None of these teams really inspire me. And even though Baylor ended up coming out with the win in this game, like everything they do just doesn't look impressive at all outside of Rob Wright. Like Rob Wright's awesome. Unbelievable. And Edgecombe got hurt in this game, and then Rob Wright just carries them from when they were 6 feet under in this game down 20. And it was pretty incredible to watch him, really take over this game down the stretch. And hopefully Edgecombe's okay, because they didn't really specify what the injury is. They said it was a knee injury, but didn't say how long he was going to be out. So if they lose him, I don't even know who they have left after Rob Wright, because Roach is still out with the concussion, and Love isn't going to play probably the rest of the year at this point. Like they have like 5 players on their roster right now.
Yeah. Then the final game from last night, Mountain West game. I'll let you speak to this one. Utah State lost by 19 against New Mexico. So I'll let you have your screen time with your beloved Mountain West.
Honestly, I don't have a ton to say about this game. Like Utah State just didn't look right at all. And their defense is regressing kind of as expected. Like Jared Calhoun in all of his years has never really had a good defense. He runs this matchup 2-3 zone that he never really comes out of. And even when teams are dissecting it for 5-6 minutes straight, he doesn't have another option. He doesn't have another defense that he really goes to. He'll just like resort to a press, and it just doesn't really work. It's not going to work against a team in New Mexico that has elite ball handlers in Donovan Dent, True Washington, and CJ Noland. And they kind of just dominated this game from the start. I mean, they were down 4 with like 6-7 minutes left in the first half, and then they kind of just ran away with it after that. And New Mexico is kind of flying under the radar. They're super balanced on both ends of the floor, and the defense has been especially impressive. And Utah State, I guess they're regressing a little bit on the offensive end too. They're not making as many shots as they did early on. And I always had the thought that Utah State was this sort of maybe like a paper tiger, not a little bit fraudulent. And it's starting to come to fruition now. They've won every game in league play by like 7 points or less. And I think it's finally starting to bite them now.
Yeah. Going to do a quick couple of shout outs from the week. Some players, some teams. First one for you, Cody. Yale picked up a big win against Princeton on Friday. Big win on the road.
Yeah, they pretty much dominated this game from the tip until about 2 minutes left in the game. They started throwing the ball away, and Princeton ended up finding their way back in it. Got down 5 or 6 with like 30, 35 seconds left. But Yale is proving that they're legit, and they can win another NCAA tournament game this season. As we all know, they beat Auburn last year when Auburn was like this dark horse national championship contender, and they kind of dominated that game in stretches. And I think they kind of have the pieces to do it again. They're super physical, and the guard play is still there, and John Poulikitis can carry that team against pretty much anyone in the country. So yeah, credit to them, and credit to James Jones for putting out another good team.
Yeah. Also, Caleb Love had a big week. Bobby Hurley had some words for Caleb Love yesterday in his press conference. Said he gets a vote for all conference in the Big 12, and there's a player on the other side that won't be getting one of them. Referring to Caleb Love. And Arizona State, actually, for that matter, didn't shake hands with Arizona after the game, refused to shake hands in a 9-point loss in a rivalry game. But nonetheless, like that's just a joke. Classless act there. But Caleb Love, big week.
I don't even know what to make of that whole situation. It was just crybabies all over the floor. Like, I think it was initiated by Arizona State. Like, I didn't end up catching a ton of this game just because there were other games that I would have rather watched. I didn't think the game was going to be as tight as it ended up being. But yeah, the whole Bobby Hurley situation is, I'll leave that to everyone else to talk about. But Caleb Love probably had the best week of any player individually this week. I mean, hit a 60-footer at the buzzer to send it to overtime against Iowa State, and they ended up going on a heater in overtime as well, and they beat them by 11, and then goes for 27, 6, and 7 in this game to carry them to a win over Arizona State. So if he can do this for another month and a half, 2 months, maybe we're talking about this team in the Final Four. But you got to go through 4 or 5 of those games in big games in the NCAA tournament, and I can tell you for free that it's probably not going to happen. If it does, like, we can record this and you can, put it on the internet, put it wherever you want, and he can prove me wrong. And, I'll die on that hill that he's not going to continue to do this. He's a great player, and he's a big shot maker in some big games, but he's going to throw up a clunker, and they're going to end up losing to a team that they shouldn't lose to.
Yeah.
However, in this shout out, and I still come out here and diss him. I probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah. However, he does have Arizona first in the Big 12 right now. Right, they're now 15-6, sitting at 9-1 in the league. Really impressive run for Arizona, who we were starting to talk about, this being a lost season. However, now they find themselves in a spot where they're going to re-enter the rankings this week, right?
They should. But to be fair, they haven't really played anyone in the league besides Iowa State at home. I don't really think they played anyone of note. They went on the road against Texas Tech and kind of got dominated.
Yeah. I mean, the Cincinnati win on the road's aging poorly. The West Virginia win on the road is aging poorly. They beat Baylor by 11, but they haven't played Kansas, Houston, Iowa State on the road, which they're going to get here to start March. So they're still going to be tested, but a good stretch nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, they're still a good team, and they're still probably a top 20 team for my money. But by the time, when they play big games, their guard play just isn't good enough. And it's not just Love. It's Bradley and Lewis. They just aren't good enough on the offensive side. And like we talked about, I thought the defensive side was going to be the elite unit for this team, and it's kind of been the offense that's had to carry them with their surprising lack of rim protection. I thought Toby Awaka was going to be way better, but just hasn't been as great as he was at Tennessee. But obviously, like I still think they're top 20. I just don't see them being in that elite tier 1 title contender area.
Yeah. So another player that rarely gets a shout out here, at least in a positive way, is Wade Taylor, especially out of my mouth.
I try my best, but
right. Caleb Love and Wade Taylor are probably two of the most hated players on this show. Maybe not hated, but the most dissed on this show. But I'm going to give Wade Taylor some credit here in the same way that we gave Caleb Love some credit. He hit a career high 7 threes last night. I wasn't sure he was ever going to miss. He started 4 for 4 and really just had it going all night. Went 7 for 10 from 3, had 25 points, and had Texas A&M up a comfortable amount against South Carolina. Ultimately, at the end, they missed some free throws and let South Carolina make it look closer than it actually was. But Wade Taylor, again, the leader of this Texas A&M team, who continues to kind of prove me wrong. They're sitting at 17-5. I've never been a huge believer of this team, but they're better than I've given them credit for. I watched most of that game last night, and they're a good team. Like they get all over the glass, as we've talked about. And if Wade Taylor is going to make shots, which at some point, much like Caleb Love, he will throw up a clunker and they'll lose to someone they shouldn't. But, there's always the chance that he throws up a clunker and they get 29 offensive rebounds and still win the game.
Yep, that's why they can beat anybody in the country. Like they don't have to shoot it well, and they can still win games. They actually have a couple backup plans as opposed to Arizona. Like they get all over the offensive glass. They're always the best offensive rebounding team in the country, and their defense is elite. It's probably, I'd call it a top 10 defense in the country. Like they're super athletic on the wings and they turn you over at a high clip. So even when they don't shoot it well, I think they have as good a chance as any. And when Wade Taylor's making shots, like if he plays like that on a stretch in the NCAA tournament, I'm not going to assure you they make a Final Four, but there's a really good chance that they make a Final Four. But just like against Houston last year, they almost took them down when Houston was basically at their best. So yeah, I still think they have a good chance this year too.
Yeah, and then the last shout out I'm going to give is Maryland. They're now 17-5, 7-4 in the Big Ten. They've won 3 straight against ranked opponents: Wisconsin, Illinois, and UCLA. They're playing really good basketball right now, and they're winning games. Like that win at Illinois was the most impressive of them all. They rolled in that game about a week and a half ago, I think now. But they went in there as underdogs and absolutely demolished Illinois, winning by 21. And then this week beat Indiana on the road in kind of a gritty way. Had to pull it out at the end, and Wisconsin yesterday winning by 8. So Maryland's put themselves in a really, really good spot down the stretch, and I think they've shown they can beat anyone, and they do have a nice stretch of games here to continue on this stretch that they've had at Ohio State on Thursday, which I think will probably be the toughest one they have until the end of the month when they play Michigan State.
Yeah, I mean, this team's legit. I think they're all the way legit, and it's because of the guard play now with Jacoby Gillespie, and Rodney Rice basically makes every shot that he takes right now, and he always had the upside when he was at Virginia Tech. He just never really was on the floor, and now that he's playing full time, and the talent's it's really popping right now. And we know the front court's going to be really good with Queen and Reese. Their creation and ability to get on the glass and score on the interior is always going to be a great quality for this team. But Jacoby Gillespie making shots and Rodney Rice making shots is going to give this team a ton of upside, and they obviously have a bunch of balance. The defense has been really solid too, although I still have some reserves on this defense. Queen isn't the most active defender out there and not the greatest rim protector, so I do have a few issues there, but they've shown that they can compete with anyone, and the run they're on right now is pretty impressive.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, we thought it'd be a good idea to talk about updated title contenders, especially now that we're 6 weeks away from Selection Sunday. So, Cody, I'll let you start here. What do you think the landscape of title contenders looks like now at this point?
Yeah, I talked about this or had an article on this in the preseason. It was more like betting related and futures related, but just talking about the requirements that you needed to have pre-tournament, like your pre-tournament ratings on Torvik's website in order to actually be able to compete for a national title or win a national title at that. And the requirements that I had were you had to have a Torvik top 10 adjusted offense and a top 30 defense. It was 11 of the last 16 champions fit this criteria. 13 of the last 16 champions were top 10 on offense pre-tournament. So that like kind of weeds out a lot of teams. Like, it gives you 10 teams at most, and then you can kind of weed more out with some defenses that aren't great. Like you can weed out Kentucky for being outside of the top 100 defensively, and they're sitting at like third offensively, I believe. There's a few other teams that you can weed out in that
Gonzaga.
regard. Gonzaga too. I still think they're kind of close. I mean, I think they're 55th right now. I don't know if there's top 30 upside by any means. I think it's more of a roster issue with them. But yeah, and 12 of the top 16 were inside the top 30 defensively out of the last 16 national champions, I'm saying, but none of them were outside of the top 40. So it's basically a requirement to be a top 40 defense along with a top 10 offense. So I'll give some leeway on the defenses a little bit. And the teams right now that fit the top 10 offense, top 30 defense are Auburn, Houston, and Duke. And those are the only three right now. And I think we have enough data points to say that, like, I don't know what other teams can really slide into that area. And Auburn has obviously shown that they're the best team in the country. And I'm not going to call them the runaway favorite because Duke is right there. But I mean, we have seen Duke's offense not really perform in some of their bigger games. We don't know if they've really fixed that because they haven't played elite competition. But those three teams right now are in they fit these requirements with a bullet. And there's a few that are outside of the top 30 just on the defensive end, but they do fit the mold to be in the top 40. That's Alabama at 34th defensively. And I think there's upside for them to be even better than that. Texas Tech at 33rd, and they're sitting at fourth right now in Torvik's offensive rating, and Purdue at 31st in their defensive rating. So they're just outside, but I don't really think they're a top 30 or 40 defense by any means. Nobody can make a shot against them right now, although they are turning teams over a bit more, which is pretty impressive and something that Matt Painter teams don't typically do. So I don't know if it's really all that sustainable. So those are the three other teams that I'm like willing to consider. And then there's a few that just missed the top 10 on offense, and those are Florida at 12. I believe they were top 10 before that 44-point performance against Tennessee. So I could probably still count them in at this point. Arizona at 14 on the offensive end. Illinois is 17th, along with their sixth rated defense, which I thought was a little bit surprising, but it made sense the more I really dove into it. And then Maryland, that we just talked about, they're 18th on the offensive end and 20th on the defensive end. So they have enough balance to where they can kind of make a run in this tournament.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I've always kind of like not given these metrics enough credit, I guess. Like the pre-tournament, like you got to be top whatever in this and top whatever in that to win the title, and then it always seems to ring true at the end, right? When the numbers don't lie. 11 of the last 16 fit the criteria. Top 10 offense, top 30 defense, according to Torvik's efficiency, right? But I think that, like you said, just looking at it, like Purdue, I don't really view that way. I know they're just outside the top 30 in defense, but I don't really view them to be that type of team. Personally, same thing with Texas Tech. Alabama for me is a different story because I think they have Mark Sears, who obviously we saw last year can just be that guy for you. But I think the offensive end, those teams that just missed out in the top 10. Like Florida's definitely the one that I'm the most in on. I think their offense this is post yesterday. I take
Yeah,
it.
this is after they were. I think they were like 7th or 8th before that game.
Yeah. So I expect them to finish the season in the top 10, honestly. Probably like yesterday, I don't think was a true showing of what they are. They just had a really bad day. But they'll bounce back and find themselves, I think, back inside that same criteria. So I would probably throw them in there as well. But some of those other teams that are just outside, like I don't trust Arizona a ton. I don't trust Illinois a ton. Maryland I like, but I still don't like. I don't view them as like a title contender. I'm not high enough on them, even though I just showered them with love. I don't think they're quite that level.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I don't really think Maryland's all the way legit as on the national scale, but they are a pretty cool. They're a fun team with a ton of balance, and I do think they do have some upside in there. And yeah, the metric that everyone likes to bring up around tournament time is you need to be top 30 on offense and top 30 on defense on Ken Palm's adjusted efficiency. But I just don't think that weeds it out enough. There's a lot of teams that fit that criteria. It ends up being like 13 or 14 teams every year, and I don't really think that's enough to weed out. I mean, the last 5 years, I think we've seen a top 5 offense win the national championship, and it's been the number 1 offense like 3 of the last 4 years. So I really do think you need to lean more into the better offenses in these settings. Like people always have this cliche take of, oh, it's defense wins championships. I think every team is coming into tournament play like super motivated, and a lot of defenses being motivated and being energized. So I do think it's really the offensive end that makes the difference at the end of the day. And being efficient in the half court on the offensive end is what's really most important.
Yeah, I agree. So just to kind of wrap things up with this, right? I think that like Auburn and Duke have clearly shown that they're like the top right now of that tier 1. Without a doubt, they haven't shown many flaws, especially of late. And then you also have like Houston, Alabama in there, Florida, Iowa State, who, depending on how you view those teams, like you could put them tier 1, tier 2. And then outside of that, right, some of the other title contenders are maybe like Illinois. You always have Kansas in the mix because they're such an elite coached team, and they do have they have tournament experience, right? Especially at this point with guys like KJ Adams and Dickinson and DeJuan Harris, and these guys have been there. So, but ultimately, I think it's going to come down to like Auburn, Duke, in terms of like who the most picked team to win it is in the bracket.
Yeah, and like I'm honestly kind of willing to go against that a little bit. I'm pretty much willing to go against picking Duke really in any brackets. I do have some small concerns about their offense still against top tier defenses. We saw them really struggle against Wake Forest for a long stretch, and they're a really good defense. They're like a top 30 Torvik defense right now, and we saw them go on like a 6-7 minute drought in that game. And elite offenses typically don't go on droughts like that. So a little bit concerned, but I do have them in tier 1. I have them with Auburn, Houston, and Alabama. I'm willing to throw in to tier 1 as a title contender. I do think the defense is better than top 30, and I'm willing to give them a little bit of leeway there because their offense is so elite. And then I put Iowa State, Florida, and Illinois as my tier 2. Like I think Illinois has so much balance, and they still have a ton of upside on the offensive end. So I'm willing to add them in there. And Iowa State, I'm the number 1 fan of Iowa State. And I've had them in tier 1 all year. I'm just not super willing to put them there anymore because I do think the offense is showing some major flaws at this point. They've fallen all the way down to 24th in offensive rating on Torvik, and they were top 5 at one point, and they lost Milan Momcilovic, but I don't think he was really all of the problem. So the shooting has been a bit iffy. So I am a little bit concerned there. And then in my tier 3, I went Gonzaga, Texas Tech, Purdue, and Kansas. I still think Gonzaga's offense is good enough to carry them through and potentially get them to Elite Eight, Final Four range, depending on how the bracket shakes out for them. And I added Kansas just because, like you said, the coaching is elite, and they still have time to figure out their offense. Hopefully, AJ Storr and Rylan Griffin can help them out on the perimeter.
Yeah, for sure. But 6 weeks from Selection Sunday should be a fun, rest of conference play and then conference tournaments. Obviously, kick into gear here in pretty much a month in some conferences. So really exciting time of year on the horizon because we can now say March Madness is next month. So that's pretty cool. But that also means the end of college basketball is also on the horizon too. So
flies by, goes by a little bit too quick.
It does. So going to quickly break down a few games here for the beginning of this week into the early midweek. First one is tomorrow, Iowa State at Kansas. Kansas, I think, is favored in this game by like a bucket. I forget the number. Three. Yeah. Kansas got kind of handled at Iowa State. Iowa State's not playing good basketball right now. Got hammered against Kansas State yesterday. And now find themselves on the road at, regardless of what Kansas is this year, they're still a good team and still have one of the best home environments in the country. So this is going to be a tough one for Iowa State to go get, I think.
I think so too. And like I said, their offense is in kind of a tough spot right now without Momcilovic, and they're just regressing shooting wise a bit right now. And they got stomped by Kansas State at home. It was such a weird game to watch. They got dominated in a lot of different facets. They got crushed on the offensive glass. So I don't really know if they can go into Fall Gallon and win this game, but I don't think Kansas's offense is really good enough to expose the Iowa State rim denial defense. You need to see AJ Storr and Rylan Griffin hit perimeter shots. And now that KJ Adams is back into the mix, they need to figure out their spacing and how they're going to operate their offense again with Flory Badunga in the mix playing a lot more minutes. So I really don't know what to make of this game. I'll say Kansas wins just because they're at home, but I don't really have a strong opinion here.
Yeah. That's really the only game worthy of noting for tomorrow, but should be a fun game in a fun atmosphere. Iowa State's probably going to be playing a little bit desperate, I would say. As Kansas probably is too, especially after losing to them the way they did on the road and then losing that big blown lead at Baylor yesterday. So should be a good game to watch if you got nothing else to watch on Monday night. Then looking ahead to Tuesday, good slate of games. We have Marquette at St. John's. St. John's really hasn't been tested that much. I mean, they have, again, in terms of what the game outcomes have been, but they haven't really played like the top class of the Big East. So Marquette going at St. John's. This spread projects at like St. John's -5. I think it's too big. St. John's has struggled despite their record, what it says, and they've barely beaten Providence twice. I would like to think Marquette can go on the road and win this game, but that spread projection is kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, St. John's has just been playing with fire all conference play. They're sitting at, what are they, 10-1 in the league? It just doesn't feel like they've dominated any of their competition outside of like Seton Hall and DePaul. Like they've had to come back against Xavier. They did dominate Georgetown as well, but Georgetown gave them problems at Madison Square Garden. So I think Marquette can give them some issues. They can their ball pressure, I think, can have a lot of success in this game. And Shaka Smart, when his back's against the wall and he's an underdog, always has success just because they can turn over anybody in the country, and they're going to be playing extra motivated off that home loss against UConn. My gut says Marquette can win this game, but I don't think what their offense is right now is fluky. I think this is kind of what they are at this point. They're just not a great shot making team. I think they just made a ton of shots in non-conference that kind of skewed our perception of this team. So I think that both of these teams are a little bit overvalued, overhyped in my opinion. It'll be a fun game to watch, but like I'll say Marquette wins by 2. I think it's just going to be a really good game to watch.
Yeah. Another game Tuesday, Michigan State at UCLA. Michigan State finally lost the game at USC on Saturday. Going to be looking to bounce back here. This game projects at UCLA -2.
Yeah, I actually like UCLA here. Even though Michigan State's coming off the loss at USC, UCLA's offense is kind of starting to figure some things out. And it's because Adai Mara is getting in the mix more. He's made this offense kind of an elite post-up offense. Him and Tyler Bilodeau have kind of dominated lately. I mean, Bilodeau just came back, but Adai Mara is really blossoming, and they can both play side by side and have a ton of success there. And when Michigan State isn't the more physical team, or when that's on like a neutral, like if they're evenly matched on the glass, I think it could create some problems for them because they don't have an elite shot making team. They really love to get to the rim, and UCLA doesn't really let you get to the rim. They kind of force you to take jump shots, and I don't think Michigan State can really beat them over the top. So I'll take UCLA at home.
Yeah, I like UCLA as well. It's probably gonna end up being a tough West Coast swing for Michigan State, as weird as that is to say. Now we have Kentucky. Last game Tuesday, we're going to talk about Kentucky, 4-4 in the conference now, playing at Ole Miss, who hasn't really played all that well against quality opponents, but they project here at -3 at home.
Kind of a surprising number, honestly. I think Kentucky can kind of name their number on the amount of threes that they're going to take, and I think that's only at their advantage. I think Kobe Bryant and Jackson Robinson can have big time days. I mean, I wish they had their point guard back in Lamont Butler. I think that injury is a lot worse than they're kind of playing it off to be. I've heard there's no timetable, but it does seem like it's a little bit worse. So I would like that for them to have their point guard presence, but Ole Miss just not really all that inspiring. I thought the offense was going to be way better than it is. They're too shot making reliant. There's no real other qualities in this game that's going to make them, super scary to face. I mean, obviously Kentucky isn't the scariest defense to face, and Padula and Jalen Murray are going to be able to hit a ton of jump shots in this game if they want to, but I think Kentucky's going to make too many threes and ultimately win this game on the road.
Yeah, it feels like that spread just feels like people are begging. They want you to take Ole Miss. Kentucky needs this one, I think, and like you said, they're going to be able to shoot as many threes as they want. So unless Vegas knows something that like Kentucky's going to shoot like 6 for 34 from 3, I'm not buying it. I think Kentucky goes on the road and wins as well.
Vegas
in the last game, yeah, they never do. Last one Wednesday, Missouri at Tennessee. Missouri's playing great basketball. Just continue to pick up quality wins. Hammered Mississippi State yesterday. Now going at Tennessee. Projected as 6-point dogs.
If Ziegler and Milicic don't play, I can see Missouri going in there and winning this game. I think they have a major edge at the guard spot, and they can turn over Tennessee a bunch. But Tennessee's physicality up front scares me a little bit, and Missouri isn't the strongest on the defensive glass. If they play too much zone in this game, I think Tennessee can kind of expose them in that area. But I'll go out on a limb and say if Ziegler or Milicic don't play, they have a little bit of a letdown here in their second game without them. You kind of see that team kind of regress without their stars. So I'll say I think Missouri can steal this game on the road, and they're playing really well. And I think there are some legit qualities about them. I think they're making a lot more shots than they're going to make the rest of the season, but I do think they're legit to an extent.
Yeah. I'm probably going to be on the side of Tennessee, but I think it's going to be a close game. I think Missouri has what it takes to keep this game close. We'll see if those guys end up sitting out or not. If they do, then I wouldn't be shocked, like you said, if Missouri wins this game. But I think Tennessee picks up another solid win at home and takes down Missouri if those guys are in.
Yeah. Should be a good game. Hopefully Missouri doesn't get smoked on the glass, like I said.
Yeah. But anyway, should be a good early week games. And other than that, we have t-shirts for sale, as we made a post about that today. If anyone wants one, we're going to be having a best bets episode coming out here probably Tuesday morning. It'll release. And then we'll have another one midweek and then another one end of the week, more than likely. So make sure you're keeping up with that stuff. Get in the Discord if you haven't already. But other than that, hope you guys enjoy the games here early in the week, kicking it off with Iowa State at Kansas tomorrow. And we'll talk to you in the next episode, Best Bets episode, which will, as I said, release on Tuesday morning.